No, you sit here, but it's all locked up there. Nobody's coming in
No, it's
there.
not locked up. It's
So
not
This
locked
can
up.
happen.
then we move there. That's it. I don't like the noise there. Let's plan on meeting at 3 o'clock tomorrow, if that works for you, at Sherwin-Williams. Thank you.
Who are you talking to? Oh. 3 o'clock. I'll be on the way to the airport.
Thank God, I hope so.
Be'ezus Hashem. Oh, Sandy is in the house. We don't see her. Marla just asked about you.
Hey, Brucey, how are you, Brucey?
It's a party. What do you, what?
Exactly. Have to sit here. How are you, Brucey? Stranger.
Rabbi,
Oh,
can you
yes.
see me now?
Welcome.
And my
Hi.
brother was raving, he's walking.
I'm so glad for you that you're doing this, and I'm sorry I missed last week.
Oh, Shalom Aleichem. Sorry, I'm just talking to someone on the Zoom. I'm sorry.
I
what'd you
hear
say?
it sounds very busy there. It
Sorry, what'd you
sounds
say?
very busy there.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
I
hear
wanted
you
to,
now.
before we got started, I wanted to wish you safe travels because I know you're heading to see your parents.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am, God willing. Tomorrow, hopefully. I'm supposed to leave on Monday, but this is a classic example of Hashem. God runs the show. God runs the world.
Absolutely. Flexibility is a life skill.
Well, with God running the show, you got to be flexible.
That's true.
Welcome. Are you from Pittsburgh? No? Shalom Aleichem. Muncie, yeah. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome.
Good to see you
You're
again.
in
How are
town
you?
now? Right. Well, someone else in Pittsburgh was a little bit like you.
Looks like me?
He's a very handsome guy. Don't
Tall,
worry.
good looking guy?
Yeah, tall,
That's- yeah,
dark,
we-
handsome, just
We
like
get-
you.
We get,
I get confused all the time. 6'2", very muscular, very athletic. Yeah. So you're here now? You moved down here? Where? Century Village. Ah, okay. You know what? Did you met anybody there in Century Village? We're looking for a driver. You know anyone who, ask if anyone maybe is interested in driving carpool, kids.
From this area?
At least.
Yeah,
Far for us to get like.
not you.
No, I'm saying anybody in Century Village is far from you, you know?
Yeah, but you know, a lot of people have time on their hands and you never know.
The carpool would be when and what areas?
Next week.
From here to Margate,
Margate.
to Coral Springs, Margate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's every in the morning and in the afternoon,
Yeah, thank you. They have their.
or one of the two.
So speaking of this, you heard
Driving an
at
SUV.
Olympic Heights, there was a
How many kids?
group of kids,
7.
Lawrence sent this morning.
Rabbi?
Rabbi, a group of kids at Olympic Heights, we got a video today, dressed as Nazis, holding up hands, Heil Hitler. So this week that happened.
Do you think they're
Yeah, the
serious
video
or
to
just
show.
idiots?
They came into school like that, and what did the school do? Nothing.
I don't know.
Couldn't need it. That's-
What are the kids do? Olympic Heights is a predominantly Jewish school, isn't it?
Perfect place for it.
And then I'll send you the. Yeah, why aren't you in
Because I could not bear the thought of just tearing myself away from you. I showed up yesterday at the counter at the airport. I told myself, how could I give up this Tuesday night class with seeing you
I
guys?
told you.
Like-
Just afraid that if she goes home, that goes on.
Like, I saying, what was I, what was I thinking? I said to the agent,
And like,
I'm
imagine
sorry.
a Female
What
rabbi
happened?
in
You
Chabad.
booked the ticket on the wrong date, so that
No. He wasn't going that you-
No, I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that I came to the counter to check in, and I went to Australia a year ago. And before I left, the Australian government sent an email with forms that you had to fill out, which I did not get this time. All I got was something from United. It's not related to this at all. So I figured, they're not requiring it. Anyway, so I show up at the counter and the guy says, well, did you fill out the forms for the Australian government? So no, I didn't get any. Well, here's the website. So, okay. So of course the Wi-Fi is not working.
Right.
So he says, battery downstairs. So I just left my suitcase and my bags downstairs, find a spot where the Wi-Fi works, start filling out the form. And you have to upload, copies of your vaccination cards and blah, 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 blah. So, I went through it and then finally got through the form and it's not submitting. And I tried again and again and again. And I just ran out of time because I had a very small window of a connection. So I said, okay, book me for tomorrow. Came home and tried from my computer, tried from the laptop, tried from, I thought, so someone said, well, maybe it's because you're using Google, what I call use Safari. Okay, I tried Safari. Then someone said, maybe it's because it's a Mac, you have to use Windows. Tried that too, tried everything under the sun. Anyway, finally figured it out at the end. I figured it out that a cousin of mine who's,
You forgot one detail.
so the main detail is, the reason it didn't work yesterday, because their system doesn't read an image that you have on your iPhone that you take with the iPhone. It has to be converted to a PDF or to a different format. How is anybody supposed to know that?
And in the meantime,
How could you possibly know that? So,
right?
huh?
In the meantime, your test failed, right? Your COVID test, your
I
negative
had to
COVID.
get another one today to be within 72 hours.
But that's true, the government forms in the United States, why do we upload, so only take a PDF, they won't take a Word document.
It wasn't Word. There's no Word. This is not a Word document, it's an image. No, it was not a JPEG. No, Apple, you took a picture on your iPhone. It's not a JPEG. Anyway, I finally spoke to a cousin of mine whose son went to Australia. So I said, well, she said, just did it on the phone, which is what I did in the airport. I tried again on the phone, but by now Mary Jo had converted the images to JPEG and it worked. Yeah, sure. Every person in that line has another brother mice at the top. They don't have the guy behind me knows anything like it. He came rocking up to the counter, an immediate bunch of profanities that this poor woman, you can't imagine the way this guy offloaded with attitude. It's like what these agents put up with is like nobody's business. They are so abused. It's true, but this guy was like out of the gate, out of control. I got friends in high places. He's threatening a lawsuit. He's starting to take United of it, just out of control, juvenile anger.
I think this generation lacks the word.
This is not a kid.
patience and consideration.
Hate to break it, but he's about your age. But okay, that's all right.
Okay,
In
so
fact,
disclosure,
what year were you born?
59.
Oh, I saw his pass when he was born in 59, just like you. A lot of unresolved trauma from that time period right there. Okay, anyway, so welcome to lesson 2. Thank you all of you who are in the Zoom house. And tonight's a really, really great class. I'm glad that I'm able to do it in person, and I make no apologies for being here. That's the title of tonight's class. By the way, you and all of you in the Zoom room, Peter Snyder, what are you doing in the Zoom room? What's your excuse? You're like 2 minutes away from here. Avi, okay, anyway. So those of you in the Zoom room, welcome. Can you hear me loud and clear? I presume. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, I see Jacqueline. I see Tonya from Tallahassee. I see Peter. And if for some reason I can't scroll down, I know there's a whole bunch of other you also in the Zoom room. So know that you are all here, and we appreciate that you're here. Okay, so as we started last week, anti-Semitism is one of the oldest known phenomena in human history. Okay, but now I'm going to ask everyone to mute yourselves, and you've got to do that because my mouse does not work. whatever reason. Okay, so whoever is not muted, please mute yourselves. Thank you. So it borderlines, it doesn't borderline, it is often absolutely absurd and contradictory. And the same remains true today. So today we're going to cover three things. Number one, anti-Semitism is ancient. Number two, it's absurd, and it is also very often contradictory. And we're going to demonstrate these points. First, we're going to read some writings from Tacitus, who was a ancient Greek philosopher, and he lived in the first century. I'm not Greek, I'm sorry, I should say Rome. And he lived in the first century in the Roman Empire. He writes about the conquest of Jerusalem. And then he breaks to talk about the history of the Jews based on the writings of his predecessors. And the absurd and idiotic anti-Semitic tropes that you will see are pretty self-evident. And then we're going to take a couple of looks at the segments from Josephus, who was a born a Jew, but he sort of sided with the Romans and went back to live in Rome after the temple, but it was destroyed, but he's still identified as a Jew, and he is the most authoritative historian of the time. He's the only one who has actual firsthand historical record of what transpired over the course of the destruction of the temple. And so even though he went back to Rome with Caesar, he defends the Jewish people against claims made by Apion, which is an anti-Semitic work from his time. Apion was a Hellenized Egyptian philosopher who lived in the first half of the first century. And we don't have his actual writings, but Josephus quotes him. So we know what this guy is up to. Okay, so let's start. This is from Tacitus, the Histories book. And we'll ask Pinchas, since you got a loud voice, so everyone can hear you in the Zoom room, why don't you take it away? That's page 48 of your student book.
Tacitus, land of the Jews.
You know what? I think you should come. Why don't you come to the front and take it away? What?
You get a gold star.
A gold star. He should be paying me for being now standing by the podium, looking like he's teaching the class. No, go ahead.
Once during a plague in Egypt, which caused bodily disfigurement, King Bacchoris approached the oracle of Ammon and asked for a remedy.
Hold up. King Bacchoris is AKA Pharaoh. He's also known as Bacchoris.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Whereupon he was told to purge his kingdom and to transport this race into other lands, since it was hateful to the gods. So the Hebrews were searched out and gathered together. Then, being abandoned in the desert, while all others lay idle and weeping, one only of the exiles, Moses by name, warned them not to hope for help from gods or men, for they were deserted by both, but to trust themselves. The Jews regard as profane all that we hold sacred. On the other hand, they permit all that we abhor. They first chose to rest on the seventh day, but after a time they were led by the charms of indolence to give over the seventh year as well to inactivity.
AKA Shemitah.
AKA Shemitah.
Sabbatical year, which is being observed right now. I'll bring you a teleprompter. Like, look at me like you're small in the crowd. It's sabbatical year, like presidents do. It's being observed right now in Israel when the land is left fallow.
Interesting. Okay.
Supposed to repeat that. Put on your teleprompter.
We're right now we're celebrating the sabbatical year in Israel while all the Jews are celebrating Shemitah. So that's where we are right now. The other customs of the Jews are base and abominable, and owe their persistence to their depravity. For the worst rascals among peoples, renouncing their ancestral religions, always keep sending tribute and contributions to Jerusalem, thereby increasing the wealth of the Jews. Again, the Jews are extremely loyal toward one another, and always ready to show compassion, but toward every other people they feel only hate and enmity.
Read on, text number 2.
Apion slanders Jews. They tell lies and invent absurd calumnies about our temple.
That
What-
means misrepresentation of truth.
Lies.
Yeah.
Without showing any consciousness of impiety. Yet to high-minded men, nothing is more disgraceful than a lie of any description, but above all on the subject of a temple of worldwide fame and commanding sanctity. Within the sanctuary, Apion has the effrontery to assert that
AKA chutzpah.
chutzpah, aka chutzpah, to assert that the Jews kept an ass's head, worshiping that animal and deeming it worthy of the deepest reverence. The fact was disclosed, he maintains, on the occasion of the spoliation of the temple by Antiochus Epiphanes, when the head, made of gold and worth a high price, was discovered.
This is the story of Antiochus and Hanukkah fame.
This is a story of Antiochus and Hanukkah,
Of Hanukkah fame. Go ahead.
of
Yeah,
Hanukkah fame.
yes.
Now, how did it escape him that the facts convict him of telling an incredible lie? He adds a second story of Greek origin, which is a malicious slander upon us from beginning to end. In their anxiety to defend Antiochus, they have further invented to discredit us the fictitious story which follows. Apion, who is there the spokesman of others, asserts that Antiochus found in the temple a couch on which a man was reclining. The king's entry was instantly hailed by him with adoration, as about to procure him profound relief. Falling at the king's knees, he stretched out his right hand and implored him to set him free. He said that he was a Greek and that while traveling about the province for his livelihood, he was suddenly kidnapped by men of foreign race and conveyed to the temple. There he was shut up and seen by nobody, but was fattened on feasts of the most lavish description. At first, these unlooked for attentions deceived him and caused him pleasure. Suspicion followed, then consternation. Finally, on consulting the attendants who waited upon him, he heard of the unutterable. Whoever has their microphone on, please mute yourself.
She's on her phone. She's not doing homework.
Todd, please mute your microphone. Finally, on consulting the attendants who waited upon him, he heard of the unutterable law of the Jews, for the sake of which he was being fed. The practice was repeated annually at a fixed season. They would kidnap a Greek foreigner, fatten him up for a year, and then lead him to a certain wood where they slew him, sacrificed his body with their customary ritual, partook of his flesh, and, while immolating the Greek, swore an oath of enmity to the Greeks. The remains of their victim were then thrown into a pit. The man stated that he had now but a few days left to live and implored the king, out of respect for the gods of Greece, to defend this Jewish plot upon his lifeblood. To defeat this Jewish plot upon his lifeblood and to deliver him from his miserable predicament.
You're done.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah, you're very good.
Absurd in our day.
No. Fools must be refuted.
Fools must be refuted, not by arguments, but by facts. Here then, we have rank impiety at its worst, and a gratuitous lie designed to mislead persons who do not trouble to investigate the facts.
Thank you very much, Assistant Professor
My pleasure, sir.
Berman. So try not to destroy the classroom on your way back. All right. Okay. There we go. All right. So this is a really creative one. He blames Egypt's societal problems on the Jewish people, and and the Pharaoh got rid of them because they were undermining, or they were the Sprouts. And it's incredible how that has repeated itself. Same thing. If you look in the Nazi newspaper, the Strumer, right? The Jews are our misfortune, right? The Jews are responsible for all of our problems. So people have historically pegged societal problems on the Jews. Plagues have been blamed. The Jews' most famous one is the poisoning of the wells. It caused the Black Death in 1349. And it's been said that Jews are idle and lazy. We're parasites. We live off of the work of others. We have been rejected by other gods. That was a very constant theme by the Christians, which is the theology of rejectionism. And that's why they embraced the quote unquote second covenant, because God rejected the covenant that he made with the Jewish people. And this justified many forms of Christian persecution. Their values are opposed to ours, as he said, opposed to our Hellenist views. We're wealthy, we're obsessed with money and gold, we rip people off, we are users, and that we hate non-Jews, we kill non-Jews in the most sadistic way. We fabricated this crazy ritual, fattening up Greeks and then taking them off and murdering them, just right, fantastical craziness. The point is, the absurdity is that this didn't stop people. These things are so absurd, but it hasn't stopped people from eagerly buying in to them and using them as justification for the often barbaric treatment that the Jewish people have been subject to. And as we all know, this continues to this very day. There are still nuts out there who peddle ridiculous conspiracy theories. And today, you just put it online, boom, and it's viral. Look at text number 3. And maybe we'll have, Peter, if you can read loud in the Zoom house, maybe we'll all be able to unmute yourself there. And let's see what people were saying around 9/11. Can you unmute yourself? Try again.
There you go.
I
Okay,
think
let's
that's it.
Big voice, let's go.
So it's, you're talking about the text 3?
I am, believe it or not, I
Okay.
am. Yeah,
Okay, I just want to make sure because I just got to my textbook. Okay. Conspiracy theories are rarely logical. It is not surprising then, even as Al-Qaeda took credit for the September 11 attacks, the group did nothing to stop a rumor claiming that the Jews were really responsible. The rumor alleged that Israel, specifically Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, was behind the plot and had warned Jews not to go to work at the World Trade Center on the day of the attacks. On September 18th, an editor for a website known as the Information Times posted a message claiming that the terrorist government of Israel cannot be ruled out as a suspect. The editor did not identify a motive or provide evidence in support of his allegation. In his words, he was simply raising a reasonable question. 5 days later, Al Manar, a TV station based in Lebanon, stated that Mossad had indeed warned 4,000 Jews who worked at the World Trade Center to stay home on September 11. Within days, that rumor appeared in newspapers and electronic mailing lists around the world. People continued to believe the lie, despite the fact that about 18% of the known dead were identified in obituaries as Jews.
so this, right, it's just absolute absurdity and contradictory to the facts. But, you know, if you have an agenda, then you are blind to the objective facts. So this was famously expressed by one of the great rabbis of pre-war Europe. His name was Rabbi Menachem Zamba, who was a rabbi in Poland. He was murdered by the Nazis during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And we're going to see a little video now with some background about Rabbi Zamba. So stay tuned right here.
On the east bank of the Vistula River, in the Warsaw suburb of Praga, a Jewish boy was born in 1883 and named Menachem, he who brings comfort. His father, Elazar Zamba, died shortly after, and the boy was raised by his grandfather. He became rapidly known as a dazzling genius and formidable Torah scholar. corresponding with the best Torah minds of his era. Menachem Zemba married at age 18. His wealthy father-in-law supported him for 20 years while he studied and put pen to paper, authoring over 10,000 pages of original Torah insights, including commentaries on Maimonides' magnum opus and on the Jerusalem Talmud, and 4 volumes of halachic responsa. His fame spread globally. He was offered rabbinical positions, including the office of the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, but he humbly shunned leadership. Leadership was thrust upon him in 1935 by order of the Grand Rabbi of Ger. The humble rabbi joined the Warsaw Rabbinate and proved his worth, becoming a world authority on Jewish law and a foremost spokesman for Polish Jewry. Before reaching age 40, Rabbi Zemba was appointed honorary secretary to Moretzes Gedolei HaTorah, the Council of Great Torah Sages, populated by sages twice his age. In 1937, he twice addressed the full assemblage and was treated with awe. Then the Nazis arrived. Jewish Warsaw was reduced to a ghetto. 460,000 people were imprisoned in just 1.3 square miles. Starvation, disease, deportation, murder. Despite repeated offers of escape, Rabbi Zemba refused to abandon his flock. To them, he was a rare pillar of comfort. As one of a handful of rabbis who survived in the ghetto until its final days, he rallied his desperate brethren with powerful messages of hope and determination. He recorded an insight into the nature of anti-Semitism before the war. In light of his subsequent experiences under Nazi depravity, his words ring with timeless poignancy. There are those who seek to identify legitimate causes for the hatred of Jews. However, reality has shown that there is no legitimate reason. Anti-Semitism has no justifiable cause. The haters simply choose to hate God's people. This is demonstrated by the fact that Jews are hated for being capitalists and also for being socialists. They are hated because they are overly ambitious and sharp-minded, and also because they are indolent and parasitic. They are hated because they are too religious and conservative, and also because they advance progressive and secular ideas. The reasons for this hatred are consistently contradictory and have not an ounce of logic behind them. Shortly before Passover, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising erupted. Amid furious fighting and flames, Rabbi Zemba calmly conducted a Passover Seder as if nothing was amiss. But on the 5th day of Passover, April 24th, 1943, Rabbi Zemba was gunned down by Nazi bullets. The community he shepherded with love and sacrifice came together at terrible risk to bury their beloved rabbi in a temporary grave. His family was deported to Treblinka. None survived. His lifetime of copious writings rose to heaven in the Warsaw fires. Hardly any of it survived. In 1958, his body was exhumed. Tens of thousands of people amassed, including an array of leading Jewish sages, to lay the heroic rabbi to eternal rest in dignity. Reality has proven that this righteous man was right. There is no legitimate reason for the hatred leveled in each generation against the innocent men, women, and children of the Jewish people.
Very powerful. He was actually at, I mentioned the video because not so relevant. He was actually at the Rebbe's wedding in 1929 in Warsaw. He told the Rebbe's father-in-law that he had never encountered a scholar like the Rebbe who was the groom. Anyway, so this is Rabbi Menachem Zemba, and we're trying to get to the next screen, but we seem to be somehow bouncing up and down between religious and secular. Ah, voila. Okay, so he makes the point very clearly of how absurd and contradictory it is. So it's very hard to, rationalize something like this. And we're going to look at text number 5 now from Devorah Lipstadt, who we had last week. We read from her. Jeff, want to come on up and read text number 5 for us here?
Sure.
What's your step?
It is hard, if not impossible, to explain something that is essentially irrational, delusional, and absurd. That is the nature of all conspiracy theories, of which anti-Semitism is just one. Think about it. Why do some people insist that the moon landings took place on a stage set someplace in the American West? Despite the existence of reams of scientific and personal evidence to the contrary, they believe this because they subscribe to the notion that the government and other powerful entities are engaged in vast conspiracies to fool the public. If we were to provide these conspiracy theorists with evidence that proves the landing was indeed on the moon, they would a priori dismiss what we say and assume we are part of the conspiracy. To try to defeat an irrational supposition, especially when it is firmly held by its proponents with a rational explanation, is virtually impossible. Any information that does not correspond with the conspiracy theorists' preferred social, political, or ethnic narratives is ipso facto false. Social scientists have described such theories as having a self-sealing quality that makes them particularly immune to challenge.
Thank you. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to refute false claims, but for some people, it would seem to be an exercise in futility. But there's another point we want to make here, and that is that the term anti-Semitism itself was coined by anti-Semites, and that was to try and present it as some sort of respectable theory, like something that is worthy of discussion and analysis, like anti-nationalist, anti-separatist, anti-monarchist. Anti-Semitism is just like it just makes it much, much more benign than it actually is. I'm going to talk about that now in text number 6. Okay, we have someone, Avi, you want to read text number 6 for us? Could I ask you a big favor? Do you mind closing the kitchen? The fridge?
Would love to, except I have my book with me.
What?
I don't have my book here. I left it in the car.
All right. Okay, so how about Sandy? You want to read text number 6 for us, please?
You're not gonna like this. I would if I could, but I don't have my book either.
Well, of course, because we have your book here. All right.
Yes, you do. I was supposed to be there with you tonight, and I'm sorry that I can't say yes to you.
Okay, we'll have a confession session later. Evelyn.
I can read.
Okay. Number
right.
6.
Right. Mar Wilhelm, German writer, political theorist, and agitator. In 1879, Mar founded the Anti-Semites League, the first organization devoted exclusively to promoting political anti-Semitism. Mar's organization reflected his secular racism, which existed inconsistently alongside his religious anti-Semitism. His self-proclaimed goal was, quote, to free Christianity from the yoke of Judaism, close quote. Mar coined the term antisemitismus, which means anti-Semitism, which for him denoted a secular racial hatred of Jews. He used the word anti-Semitism to make Jew hatred seem rational, sanctioned by science, polite.
So this is a guy who originated this term, but before that, it was called out for what it is. And we're going to, the next reading, which I'm going to ask you also to read, is from a German woman who lived in, a Jewish businesswoman. She lived in Hamburg. Her name was Gluckel, of Hamel. And she wrote about something, an incident that happened in her time in Hamburg, where a Jew, you know about the story?
My parents and grandparents.
Oh, yeah. So a Jew was murdered there, this is in 1687, and the two perpetrators were sentenced to death, and it caused riots. The idea that two German citizens should be put to death for murdering a Jew caused tremendous upheaval, and there was a lot of agitation and from the masses. So she writes about it. Evelyn, why don't you continue reading page 58, text number 7.
Okay, call it what it is. On the day the murderer was sentenced to death, there was a commotion in Hamburg that had not been seen there for 100 years over any man sentenced to death. The lives of all Jews were in danger due to the extreme rishus, the evil or wickedness that has been roused.
So she uses the term rishus. It's wickedness. It's evil, plain and simple. And she wrote a memoir, and that is the way she describes Jew hatred, as simple wickedness, and that's what it is.
That goes all the way back to
1687. And she's not the only one. Other Jews at that time also refer to it that way. So even though we call this course Outsmarting Antisemitism, we want to make a disclaimer that the term itself is actually a very pejorative term with an agenda to try and give it, some legitimacy, like it belongs in the big public discourse of just another benign movement. But what it is, plain and simple, is evil. Rishus was a guy.
Rabbi, shouldn't it even just be not correct? Because aren't Arabs Semites also? So shouldn't it mean any Semite?
Yeah, technically, but exactly, technically it's not even correct, right? We're not the only Semites, but it became obviously identified specifically with the Jews. What does the guy in Shtisel say? The Shoim Arurim, the cursed, he didn't pick up on that line. Okay, that's the brother from Belgium. Any Gentile that does anything in any way, shape, or form that he doesn't like is immediately an anti-Semite, and that's it. I'm finished. End of story. Okay, so the question is, okay, is it futile to try and even unpack this, unravel this mystery, something that is so illogical, as we've pointed out, so contradictory? Why the Jews? It's like, why are we targeted? So there are, what?
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, so there's a lot of theories out there and that are worthy of discussion. And we're going to take something from one of the most famous incidents of Jew hatred, and that's from the story of Purim, which we referenced last week, and we're going to reference it tonight as well. And I don't think that there is any one single theory that accounts for it all, but there are some overarching theories that can be ascribed to a lot of instances of anti-Semitism throughout history and the persistence of it. What? Yeah.
In some ways, where over the centuries we were set up, because Jews were never allowed to own land. They weren't able to own land. How do you make a living? And that's how the whole finance, bank, and everything. The Merchant of Venice with lovely, but it's still the same story. We had no other choice.
That's why. Why is that? So why is that amount to being hated?
But they hate it because if you owe us money, or you're a Jew, you're charging too much and everything. Because we weren't allowed to.
So that itself, right? So that itself was perpetrated against us. So it's just all part. It's all part of the hatred. The fact that we're denied the land ownership is all part of anti-Semitism. All part of hatred. Okay, so here's a beautiful reading, as always, poignant from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. We're on page 60, text number 8. There's been an almost endless set of speculations about what the cause of anti-Semitism actually is. Some have seen it in psychological terms: displaced fear, externalization of inner conflict, projected guilt, the creation of a scapegoat. Others have given it a socio-political explanation. Jews were a group who could conceivably be blamed for economic resentment, social unrest, class conflict, or destabilizing change. Yet others view it through the prism of culture and identity. Jews were the stereotyped outsiders against whom a group could define itself. So one of the ironies of history is that here we have the different areas where Jews have been singled out, or that might be the inner cause coming from the anti-Semite psychological, socio-political, cultural, religious. Yet others, noting the concentration of anti-Semitism among the very faiths, Christianity and Islam, that trace their descent to Abraham and Judaism, favor a Freudian explanation in terms of the myth of Oedipus. We seek to kill those who gave us birth. It would be strange indeed if so complex a phenomenon did not give rise to multiple explanations. So, like I said, there's all different types of theories and explanations out there, but we are going to turn to Jewish sources. That's our goal here, rather than seeking external sources. We want to look within. And as we said last week, what we want to walk away with is with a perspective, a Jewish perspective on this issue. And this brings us back, as I said, to the book of Esther, because that's one of the biblical sort of sources for it. So in the 3rd chapter of the Megillah, the book of Esther, Haman comes to the king with this senior advisor to annihilate the Jews, and he goes about getting his approval by offering him 10,000 talents of silver. He says, look, there's this people, they're scattered all over the different kingdoms, and he asks for, what are you trying to do?
It's kind of freezing here.
It's a tundra. Thank you.
You just press off on the remote control. Better call the head of security if we got an issue there. So he offers 10,000 talents to compensate them, to contribute to the king's treasury. The king doesn't not need much convincing. He tells Haman, the silver you can keep, and the people you can do as you please. So here you have two natural bedfellows. They're like partners in crime. Perfect. Achashverosh needs no convincing whatsoever. He's ready to jump on the bandwagon right away. So here the Talmud says something very interesting about Haman and Achashverosh. Gives an interesting parable. We are on page 61, text number 9. We can use a parable to gain insight into the respective positions of Achashverosh, who was the king, and Haman, the advisor. They are similar to two individuals, one of whom has a tall mound in his field, whereas the other has a ditch in his field. The owner of the ditch mused to himself, I wish I could buy the tall mound to fill up my ditch. The owner of the mound said to himself, I wish I could purchase the right to dump my mound into his empty ditch. Not long afterward, the two met. The owner of the ditch says, sell me your mound. The owner of the mound said, take it for free. You'll do me a favor. Take the dirt. I want to get rid of the mound. You want to fill your ditch? It's fantastic. So what is the Talmud trying to convey here? It's trying to give us a deeper understanding of the dynamics between Haman and Achashverosh. The question is, so Haman is the one who has the ditch. Achashverosh is the one who has the mound, right? So Haman is in the parable, the one looking to fill the ditch. But what does that mean? He's looking to fill a ditch. A ditch is an empty space. He's trying to annihilate the Jews. He's trying to get rid of the presence of the Jews. So how is he being described as someone who's in possession of a ditch that needs to be filled? So the Talmud is telling us here that there are two dimensions to anti-Semitism. And that is this. You have Achashverosh. He is the more classic anti-Semite, typical racism and xenophobia. He just sees a group of people that are just different. To him, the Jews are a mound and they're a nuisance. They're just like, they're different. And because you're different, I hate you and I want you gone. Just like a field owner who has a pile of dirt sees it and says, I don't want this. It's an ugly, unwanted presence in my field. I want to get rid of it. But that is not the sum total of anti-Semitism. There's another half, another part of it, another side to it, and that is the ditch. So Achashverosh is the mound type anti-Semite, and Haman is the ditch type of anti-Semite. Now, what is that? And it's actually a deeper type of anti-Semitism, and it uncovers something more deeply about the anti-Semite, because the Talmud calls Achashverosh a fool, but Haman was more sophisticated, and he had a more sophisticated and deeper, actually, hatred for the Jews. You know why? Because the Jews made him feel like a ditch in his own field. The Jew gave him a sense of emptiness that gnawed at him. He had all the conventional gifts of life that a person could want. He had a family, he had fame, and he had fortune, and he had power. And everybody in Shushan had to bow down to him when he passed by. So he had everything. And yet...
Yeah, but it bothered him that Mordecai didn't bow down.
Of course. Well, why did it bother him so much that one person wouldn't bow down to him? So look at text number 10. This is from the Megillah. Haman told them about his magnificent wealth. This is at this feast, and his many sons, and how the king had promoted him and advanced him among the other officials and royal courtiers. I'm sorry, he's relating this to his family. What is more, said Haman, Queen Esther personally prepared a feast. And besides, the king, she did not invite anyone but me. This is after the first meal, feast that she invites them to. And tomorrow too, I'm invited by her along with the king. Now, here's the kicker. But all this means nothing to me. Each time I see Mordechai the Jew sitting at the palace gate. So it's not only that he sat, the idea is that he did not bow down to Haman. And this refusal of Mordechai to bow down to him absolutely eats at his kishkis. And it made his entire, look, this is his own words. All this is nothing to me. All of my fortune and all of my fame and all my power is nothing to me. Nothing. Why? Because Mordechai won't bow down to me. Why does this so get to Haman? And when Haman confronted Mordechai, he was reminded by Mordechai that he is a person whose allegiance is to God and to Sinai, not to Haman and not to his fellow man. And that's something that he's prepared to sacrifice for. And that's why he's not going to bow down to a fellow human being, because that is not to whom his allegiance is. His allegiance is to God. And that gave Haman a deep sense of a void in his own life. Because what was his life about? He obsessed about his own selfish materialism. And materialism is at best only a temporary, gives us a temporary sense of satisfaction, and ultimately is hollow and leaves us empty. The Torah teaches that every human being was created for a purpose, and that we're needed by God. And that is ultimately, as we know, where contentment and happiness and fulfillment comes from. It comes from purpose, not from possessions. But his life was all possession centered or centric. And Mordechai was the one who represented purpose. So as much as he tries to, the person who's living in the world of materialism and possession tries to obliterate that, you want to call it conscience, the idea that I need to be doing more with my life, he tried to shut it down, and he has everyone bowing down to him, which keeps propping up his artificial power. But Mordechai is the one who keeps undermining him by exposing him for the shallow human being that he is, the insecure, shallow human being that he is. And that caused tremendous resentment, so much so that he wanted to perpetrate a genocide against the entire Jewish people, because Mordechai was the symbol of the Jewish people. He was the leader. But what he hated about Mordechai, which is just his mere presence, just made him feel insignificant and exposed. Every Jew had the same effect on him, because if you think about it, he could have just killed Mordechai. If Mordechai was the problem, then he had access to him. And no, because this was an indictment on the entire Jewish people, because the Jew somehow, by his very being, embodies the idea that we come from a higher place, we have a higher purpose, humanity, we are ambassadors of God, whether we like it or not. We just carry that, we carry that aura, we carry that presence within our very being. So this is what was the cause for this Haman ditch type of hatred, which is that the Jew is a trigger. And what is the trigger? It's a trigger for my own inner void and forces me to go to the uncomfortable place within myself that I don't want to go there. I want to live in a very superficial level of existence, and the Jew gnaws at my conscience and exposes me for what I am. So, yeah.
The other Jews, did the other Jews bow down to him? It was just, and I was the only Jew that did not.
The Megillah doesn't say explicitly that others did. We know, as we spoke about last week, that there were Jews who partook in the feast of Achashverosh. But the larger point here is that it's not so much about even the level of religious identity that a Jew has, or how observant they are. It is the very notion of a Jew that a guy like Haman sees as his anti. And it makes him feel very threatened and very insecure. So let's look at now at text number 11, another reading from Rabbi Sachs, and that is about the importance of us not internalizing anti-Semitism. Very important reading. Who wants to come? Who would like to come to the front? Okay, come on up. Text number 11, page 64. Here, we always come up. We never go down. Okay, come on up.
Come on up. Jews must fight anti-Semitism, but never internalize it. That is easier said than done. If you are hated, it is natural to believe you are hateful, that the defect lies in you. It rarely does. Hate exists in the mind of the hater, not in the person of the hated. Jews have faults, and Judaism is a religion of self-criticism and repentance, but those faults have nothing to do with those of which they are accused by their enemies. Anti-Semitism tells us about anti-Semites, not Jews. One of the mistakes made by good, honorable, and reflective Jews was to believe that since Jews were hated because they were different, they should try as far as possible not to be different. So some converted, others assimilated, yet others reformulated Judaism to eliminate as far as possible all that made Jew and Judaism distinctive. When these things failed, as they did, not only in 19th century Germany and Austria, but also in 15th century Spain, some internalized this failure. Thus was born the tortured psychology known as Jewish self-hatred.
Thank you. Very, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful point. Thank you for that. So we have extreme examples of this, what he calls internalization of self-hatred, and Jews advocating, therefore, some complete and total assimilation as a way to avert anti-Semitism, or just to give up on some of our traditions and be more current, be more modern. Others have said we need to renounce the idea that we are part of the chosen nation, or that we are the chosen people. The Reconstructionist movement called for stated that we no longer, the modern Jew cannot uphold this belief of chosenness, seeing that as a big cause of anti-Semitism. Others advocated for intermarriage. We intermarry and we integrate into the larger world around us, and we'll be more accepted, and so on. And these attempts have always, time and again, proven to be unsuccessful in solving anti-Semitism. You just look at the mass, no better example, unfortunately, than Germany in the 19th and 20th centuries. German Jews were from the most assimilated and secularized Jews. And the same thing that happened in the 15th century Spain. Many of the Jews who died at the stake of the Inquisition were Jews who were Marranos, who outwardly actually embraced Christianity, but that didn't fool anybody, and that didn't save their lives. So, in fact, by trying to change ourselves is never the solution to solving anti-Semitism. It's looking in the wrong direction. You know why? Because the problem is not us. The problem is the hater, is the anti-Semite. So we're not going to change it by changing ourselves. So whenever we are discussing this question of why, the answer should never be self-blame. Well, if only we did something different, because we have tinkered and we have toyed and with all different types of attempts to finally put it to rest and gain acceptance from the world, and anything that has come at the cost of our Jewish identity has never solved the problem. And that, so one of the big issues to summarize this section, as we said, is the anti-Semitism that's born of the ditch problems. This is not our problem. This is an insecurity that we trigger just by who we are. Changing anything about us is not going to, and by the way, Hitler wrote that in Mein Kampf. The Jew is the conscience of the world. And he wrote, man is programmed to be a barbarian. And we have to get, and to him, it didn't matter how religious. That's why the Nazis changed the definition of Judaism, of Jews, from a religion to a race, because he didn't care about your level of religious observance. A Jew is a Jew, and his very presence gnaws at the conscience of man. So he didn't target only religious Jews, outwardly religious. He targeted everybody, because to him, like I said, every Jew embodies that very same ambassadorship. So we have struggled with this issue for a long time, and of course, we still do. Yeah.
I mean, you said the belief that we're the chosen people. It's not a belief. Stated what the chosen is.
Fact. Happy with that? The fact. Okay. Okay. So the bottom line is that explanations for anti-Semitism have to be turned outward, not looking for self-blame to ourselves. And here we have a very famous story that you've probably all heard 100 times, because I've said it about 100 times. quote in text number 12 from Rabbi Twersky. He writes, this is on page 66, text number 12. I was once traveling on a bus dressed in my customary garb, wearing a broad black hat and a black frock coat. A man approached me and said, I think it's shameful that your appearance is so different. There's no need for Jews in America to be so conspicuous with long beards and black hats. I'm sorry, mister, I said to the man. I'm not Jewish, I'm Amish. And this is how we dress. The man became so apologetic. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, sir, he said. I did not mean to offend you. I think you should be proud of preserving your traditions.
Unbelievable.
So, if it's Amish, so what's, because you're not a reflection of me, that's why. I don't care. You can walk around, whatever, because you're not, but a fellow Jew, somehow I see you, you're a reflection of me, and you make me uncomfortable. And we're trying to fit into America, not be so conspicuous. It's okay for other people to be conspicuous, but the Jew, we're doing our darnest to try and shed ourselves of the shtetl and the old European look and fit into America and finally integrate and put anti-Semitism to rest. So the question is, so, do we belong? Do we belong? Do we belong in Western civilizations? Do we belong in America? Do we belong in Canada? Do we belong in Australia? Do we belong? If we belong, if a Jew belongs, then that means that we belong in a way that we are able to preserve our identity. We shouldn't have to compromise our identity. If we belong in a country, then that means we should be able to fully express who we are in public. And we should be able to leave our homes without any fear of being who we are. If it's a free country, it's a free country. What is the basic definition of freedom? Freedom of expression. That's the basic definition of it. We should be able to free to look like Jews in the public sphere, to light menorahs in the public sphere, and not have to feel like we need to in any way conceal or hide our Jewish identity, or think that being too out there in our identity is the cause of anti-Semitism. Arguably, just the opposite. The prouder we are in the public sphere, the more we come across as self-respecting. Actually, we very often see that garners greater respect from those around us. So, if anything, a rise in anti-Semitism is not a reason to cower or to retreat, but if anything, it would be a reason to do just the opposite, be proud. Exactly.
Haven't we all heard, Rabbi, that a country is judged by the way it treats its Jews?
That's exactly right. We are the canary in the coal mine. Okay. How about someone in the Zoom room? Does anyone have the book who can actually?
I'll read it.
Okay.
I love Barry Weiss. I'm happy you're reading.
Okay. Loud.
Rabbi, before you go on, can you answer what? So if Hitler calls us a race instead of a religion, is that how you think we should band together to help fight anti-Semitism? To unify all the Jews to thinking they were all the same from one place, one forefather, as opposed to current thinking is everybody's into their own belief system, kind of separating based on their religiosity.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, King David said, I have learned much from my enemies. You can learn a lot from your enemies. And in this case, one thing you can learn from Hitler, Yimach Shemoi, may his name be obliterated, is how he did not distinguish between Jew, religious, irreligious, secular, devout, Hasidic, non-Hasidic. To him, a Jew is a Jew. And in that respect, he's very right. And yes, we need to learn from that in the way that we look at each other, because the anti-Semites certainly see us as one people and don't care about what your particular philosophy or a movement, whatever it is that you are affiliated with. They don't care about affiliation. They know that affiliation is totally, it's fluff. Affiliation is fluff. A Jew is something very essential and very core. And yes, we need to have that perception of ourselves and each other as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
The DNA companies, when you have your DNA taken, will indicate that you are a certain percentage Jewish. My
Mhm.
wife is 100% Jewish. Okay, she's not German, she's not American. she's
Loud,
not
loud.
English, She's not anything other than Jewish.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not a
It's
race.
interesting.
It's not a race,
breed,
but,
It's a
but,
religion.
but
Right.
Well,
she's
well-
identified by DNA as being 100% Jewish. I haven't done my
It's
DNA, so I don't
nonsense,
know.
right?
But,
Fundamentally, it's nonsense.
well, it's interesting. I
Yeah,
mean,
because the GDNA is supposed to tell you where you're from Russia. or
Right, right.
Poland,
Okay, let's look at text number 13. So who's reading it?
Okay, I'm reading it.
Yeah.
In first, oh, they can't hear me?
Anyway, we don't only want to be heard, we want to be seen. So we're not phantoms
Okay.
of the opera.
When statements are needed, in the first 3 decades of my life, I never wore a Magen David necklace. It always seemed redundant to me. But since the Pittsburgh attack, I have worn a Jewish star pendant regularly, especially in public venues and in situations where I'm conscious of being one of the only Jews in the room. The show of pride has become important to me. I want people to know that I am unafraid. That's good. This is an example by Mitchell Leschiner during the middle school graduation this spring in Vernon Hills, Illinois. Leschiner doesn't usually wear a kippah, but the Poway shooting changed things for the 14-year-old. It is important to make a statement that we're still here and that no matter what happens, we'll still be here, he said. It's true.
Thank you.
Very true.
Indeed. Well, here's the thing, that the beneficiaries of our maintaining our distinctiveness is not only ourselves, but actually the greater society also benefits from that. Because if we give in to the idea that a majority should be able to taunt or suppress a minority into silence, then that is to the detriment of society at large. So our maintenance of our own distinctiveness is actually of a benefit to other minorities as well. And we help the world embrace what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs called the dignity of difference. Actually wrote a book. It's also a lyric in my song about Jonathan Sachs. Of course, you know that from there. So this is where historian Cecil Roth wrote how Jews have served this important role for many centuries, reminding people that there is a different way to think. Okay, let's look at page 67. We have any volunteers in the Zoom room to read text number 14? Anyone in the Zoom room?
I'll read.
Who's I?
Jacqueline.
Hi, Jacqueline. How are you?
I'm not sure if you can see me or not. Is it
I can
working?
see you.
Yes.
Wonderful.
All right. I see that big clock behind you reminding me that time is ticking. So
Change it. It's too high up. In this fact, perhaps, lay the greatest service of the medieval Jew to mankind. It was a period when authority was triumphant in the intellectual sphere, when thought was circumscribed even more than practice, when uniformity had established itself, not as an accident, but as a principle throughout European life. Had this state of affairs continued unchallenged, progress, scientific as well as philosophical, would have been impossible. The mere fact that the Jew existed and that he preserved the habit of independent thought helped to save the world from this menace. It was impossible even for the least original mind to fail to realize that in the Jewish quarter, there existed a class as intelligent, at least as other men were, who yet did not believe as other men, who possessed literature and beliefs and practices which were not like those of the rest of the world, and who refused to pay even lip service to the prevailing ideas. This very fact saved the world from accepting uniformity finally as a natural thing. It stimulated students and thinkers to realize the existence of other spheres to conquer over and above those which were delineated from the pulpit. And if from time to time Europe shook off its lethargy and began to re-examine for itself the wells of human thought, the propinquity of the Jew was in part responsible.
You said propinquity like that's a word you use every day.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask everybody if they know what it means. It actually means proximity. So thank you very much. So simply by being proud of our difference is a way of representing to the world that it's okay to be different and you don't have to be like everybody else. And that is a real important message for humanity at large. Now we're going to go back, we're going to pivot back to the Purim story. And that is to say that not only is maintaining our identity not proven successful in reducing anti-Semitism, one could argue, as we said before, that an outward projection and posturing of our Jewish identity is actually a mechanism to reduce anti-Semitism. And to demonstrate this point, we're going to go back to the Purim story. Obvious question arises about Achashverosh's attitude to the Jewish people. Haman attacks the Jewish people. Now, how does he present it to Achashverosh? He says, we're distinct, we're different, we're like separatists. We have our own exotic laws. You know, we're different. To Achashverosh, he's hearing, like we said, a mound. He's hearing a mounds of Jews that need to be gotten rid of. And it's not worth for the king to keep them, is what he says. Achashverosh, as we said, instantly bought into it. And then what happens towards the end of the story? Esther goes into the king, invites him to a party, him and Haman, and then to a second party. And what does she do at the second party? What does Esther do? She discloses her identity, that she's a Jew. And now all of a sudden he's enraged that about Haman's plan to kill the Jews. And the question, what gives? Like, what changed? That we were still the same separate and different people as we were when Haman first made his case. Why does Achashverosh make an about face now and suddenly decide to spare the Jews?
Sometimes the stereotypes may not realize that some stereotypes may not knows his wife.
So if he loved Esther, which he seemed to, he could have just spared her, given her an exception to the decree which he had signed, and that's it. Why did his overall attitude towards the Jewish people what suddenly changed? So you're onto something there. Yes, he learned that he had fallen into the stereotype trap. Yes, thank you. Okay, who read last? You did, yeah? Anyone? No, Jacqueline. Jacqueline read last, yeah? Okay, who wants to read the next one? That's reading number 15. Any volunteers? Yeah, loud. Loud and proud. This is number 15, page 70.
Exposing a faulty conclusion. Should I do the Hebrew or the English? All that Esther had to do was to prove that the conclusion presented by Haman following his argument against the Jews, namely, that it is not in the king's interest to let them remain, was false. She told the king, it is true that this nation is, as Haman stated, a people scattered and separated among the nations. It is also true that their laws differ from other peoples. Nevertheless, despite this, she told King Ahasuerus, you can see for yourself that Haman's conclusion that it is not in the king's interest to let them remain is not true. To the contrary, you can see that the uniqueness of the Jewish people is actually a positive quality. This response is succinctly captured in the words Esther spoke to Ahasuerus. May my life be given me in my petition and my people in my request. To Haman's claim that letting the Jews live was against the king's interest,
Esther responded, you should realize that this is the nation from which I, Esther, emerged. It is my nation, the people that produced me, that raised and educated me, and I conduct myself in its ways. You know well that you selected me from all the finest ladies, who were themselves selected from the 127 countries of the empire, of your empire. If so, you have in front of you evidence that the entire complaint is without basis. Ahasuerus agreed. He was familiar with Esther's superior qualities and exemplary behavior. When he learned from her that her conduct was reflective of the conduct of the Jewish people, my people, he was left with one question. Who in their right mind would seek to destroy a people that produces individuals as good as Esther? It can only be an evil and dangerous person.
Huh? Thank you. Yeah. So here's the thing. This, I think, a really powerful lesson from Esther, that with regards to our own Jewish identity in the public sphere, whether it's in the workplace or whatever other environment, and even vis-a-vis a person who may have been exposed, whatever's been exposed to anti-Semitism, or may have some type of anti-Semitic sentiment inside of them. One of the most powerful antidotes is that for a person to know, a person who likes you, knows you, respects you as a good person, is for that person to know that the reason that you're a good person is because it's linked to your Jewish identity, who you are, the person that you know, that you respect. I am who I am because I'm Jewish, because I have Jewish values, and I was brought up with Jewish values. So if you respect and admire me, this is what Esther was saying to Ahasuerus. I am part of a bigger picture. I was produced. I'm a product of a people. I'm a product of an ethical standard. I'm not in a vacuum. So at the end of the day, our most powerful and potent sphere of influence are the people that we actually come in contact with. Of course, anyone can post anything online, and you can have 7,000 Facebook friends, but the most powerful impact that you can have is in person, which explains why I'm here. And I didn't go to Australia to give the class in person. Don't ask me what's going to be the story next week. We'll come up with another answer why I'm doing it online. But that's the point. The point is that, and it can be done in very, very subtle ways. People have this misnomer that to say anything that have of any Judaic content, well, I'm not a rabbi, I can't talk about Judaism, I'm not that religious. It has nothing to do with that. We carry our Jewish identity with us, and it needs to be something that we're comfortable internally. It starts with our own internal identity and comfort level. And a simple way to create environments like that. And I always heard this actually growing up. These are the stories that I heard from my father in his office, in his workplace. My father's not a rabbi, but you walked into his business, you saw mezuzahs on the doors, and you saw, you could just tell that this is a Jewish business. You saw just the pictures. So any Jew could tell, and the Gentiles also knew from who he was and the fact that he was closed on Shabbos and on Jewish holidays. And this only brought him a lot of respect. People wanted to do business with him, and a lot of times conversations pivoted in a Jewish direction, and people knew very, very well that here's the upstanding business person that you want to do business, an honorable person, because he's a Jew. And these are the values that he brings with him into, and that, I think, is the most powerful antidote. The person that you actually know is the person that makes the most impact on you. And this is also true in someone gave me this book called The Masters of Scale, like the guys who've created the biggest companies in America, from the Googles to Airbnb to whatever. They say when you really have to build a company, to start small and really get to know the people that are actually using whatever product. So like these guys who started Airbnb initially, they would stay in people's homes who are actually started in New York City. Stayed in their apartments and learn from them. What are the kind of things that people look for when they're staying in someone's house? Because most people thought the whole idea of Airbnb was ridiculous, was never going to take off. Could you imagine that? But the way they learned how to build it was suggestions from the people and getting to know the actual people who were the initial people hosting people in their homes. And that's how they created something on a very strong foundation, because it's very real. Okay.
Rabbi, I want to say something and ask something, because what this brings to mind is, on the one hand, we're saying, don't think there's ever any rational reason for anti-Semitism. But on the other hand, we're saying that who we are as a people should convince people, or should make most people see, that Jews bring a gift to the world. And what that leads me to think of is that maybe part of the fight against anti-Semitism needs to be addressed to those Jews who unfortunately create negative impressions, and especially ones that are world-renowned, like Zuckerberg or whatever, and become a magnet for symbolizing the negative of the Jew. And maybe those people need these classes and need to be educated, the responsibility that they have as a Jew. What do you think?
I think I don't like to talk in terms of those. I like to talk in terms of we, and most importantly, me. And starting with I think that this is a responsibility that each and every one of us carries, and that the person that we need to be most cognizant of and responsible towards are ourselves. Certainly people who have a big public persona and a big public profile, obviously, have a big voice in the public sphere. But you cite even the example you just cited. Okay, Zuckerberg. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what you're.
Just because the name is thrown around a lot now. But I mean,
I don't know. Let me just tell you. Let me just tell you, since you mentioned his name, and I'm not, don't like calling people out by name, but let me just tell you, I happen to know a rabbi who is very close friends with Zuckerberg. Showed me on his phone his text conversations with him. And last year, when COVID really was so rampant, and talking about last year, February, March last year, and people were dying like flies all over the place. This rabbi, it was around Purim time, right? Remember Purim time is when he showed me Zuckerberg's Hebrew name is Mordechai. And he said to Zuckerberg, your Hebrew name is Mordechai. You got to step up and you got to be like a Mordechai and help out and help people out. Now, so behind the scenes, you don't know this, this is not public. At that time, he gave millions and millions and millions of dollars, which is not reported in the public at all, because he doesn't like to do these things in a way that's recognized. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was for respirators and to developing countries, and he gave away tens and tens of millions of dollars to help disadvantaged people who were suffering through COVID. So even a guy like that, we shouldn't rush to judge, because we don't know what people are, we don't know the total picture of what people are doing.
But that's exactly the point, that it's not about judgment, it's about educating Jewish leaders to the role that they play in anti-Semitism. That they should be very cognizant of that should be part of Jewish education.
I totally agree. But to your first point, you asked the question, that we started the class by saying that that anti-Semitism is so absurd and so contradictory often, and it's like insoluble because it's so irrational.
Right.
Now we seem to be saying, well, the solution is a greater degree of Jewish pride in the public sphere.
A possibility of solution, yeah.
Right, you're asking that question, right? So,
yes.
So we're not, as I said in the beginning of the class, that I don't think anyone would report to say that there is one singular solution because some anti-Semite for some anti-Semites, it doesn't matter what we do, even if we are out there in the public spheres as prouder Jews, that's not going to cut it for them either. But I would say that, and that's a problem we're gonna have to live with until Mashiach comes. But I would say that there is an increasing measure of respect among the nations toward the Jewish people. I mean, and you look, we're going to come up on Hanukkah soon, and you will see menorah lightings all over the world in public squares, from Prague to Moscow to everywhere. And you will see public officials there, and you will see hundreds and thousands of people, and many of them are non-Jews. We're very, very proud to be able to come and to celebrate Hanukkah in a very public way. And governments and officials it's an incredible global phenomenon that that we're all aware of. And I think that that's indicative of the trend of the times that we're living now, that our focus needs to be more on that and what we can do. Again, for some, it's an incurable disease, right? But for others, there are ways to mitigate it. And the mitigation is primarily, again, through our own looking within our own selves and being greater purveyors of Jewish values, through being more educated ourselves and being more comfortable in our interactions with the people and the way we conduct ourselves in the public sphere of our Jewish identity.
So Rabbi, this is a perfect moment for you to give a plug about December 8th, how we are going to be lighting the Hanukkah menorah, the Hanukkah, in Meisner Park for everybody to participate in and everybody to see.
I don't think December 8th.
Right.
No, but whatever it is. that sounds good.
You'll be lighting
So plug your direction.
But it'll still be burning then.
He meant well, he meant well.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before that, December 2nd, we'll also be doing it right here in a very public place, by the way.
Right, if you want us to come,
Okay.
we'll come.
Anyway,
Rabbi, I have
yeah.
one quick question.
1 second. I'm gonna
Rabbi,
someone from the Zoom room. Yes, Tanya from Tallahassee. Yes.
yeah, this is Tanya from Tallahassee. For a lot of people up here in Tallahassee, I may be the only Jewish person that they've ever met. I mean, I get common questions like, well, you worship Jesus in your Jewish church. And then I have to kind of explain that I don't go to a Jewish church, and, I have to do all that. But what I try to never forget is that I may be the only Jew they ever meet. And if somebody comes up to them, if I've been kind and considerate, helpful, if I bite my tongue, if I go out of my way to be courteous, then if somebody comes up to them and says, all Jews are da-da-da, they're going to know at least one Jew that wasn't.
Yes.
And that's a very powerful statement when they say, I don't know. I know someone who is Jewish and who didn't do that, who would never do that.
Yeah.
So.
Great point. Great point.
Yes.
Rabbi, I have
Yeah.
one quick one to try to-
Yeah.
An example in the Megillah. Now, that can go any way depending on the king.
What's that?
In the Megillah, with the king, that situation is totally the other way, that the king was insecure and he's afraid of the Jewish people. Meaning that, well, here, he recognized how good Esther was, and how much value that she and the people and the Jews were to Israel. But it could have gone the other way if the king felt that the Jews were a threat to him, and they could have killed the Jews. You see my point of view?
Well, there were no, but there were no threat, and he realized that Haman's describing them that way was a fallacy. And this is the point that she was making, was that who I am is, she's linking herself to my people, and that's what got him to change his perception. It did start out the other way, but it changed. But how did it change? It changed by Esther declaring herself to be a part of this people. So if you love me, then you need to love the people or appreciate the people that produced me. So it wasn't by her diminishing her identity, it was actually amplifying her Jewish identity that brought about the salvation. So talking about, like you said, the story, Tanya, of Tallahassee, that, your personal interactions, sometimes you might be the only Jew. Here's a very powerful little anecdote from a ex-Fatah Palestinian who he's a professor in Quds University, and he took a group of Palestinian kids to Auschwitz, and which of course he lost his job for. But what triggered him taking his what triggered him taking the kids in his class to Auschwitz? So he said in a 2019 interview, he said as follows, text number 16. Anyone want to read it? Devar, you want to read it? It's page 72, text 16. Come on up. What makes a difference? Yeah.
What makes a difference? I started going with my father to Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital for his chemotherapy. And to my shock, I started to observe that the doctors and the nurses treated him as a patient. The doctors were very friendly, and the nurses were also. He will bring them fruit, flowers, and chocolate. And I noticed in the hospital that Palestinians are also receiving treatment. They actually awakened me to a great extent to the humanity in the other, and it also awakened my humanity. This was a starting point.
Thank you. Okay. So his treatment in an Israeli hospital of his father gave him an opportunity to actually interact, and it shattered all these stereotypes that he was told about Jews and Israelis and so on and so forth. So, as we said before, until the redemption comes, and we're getting close, but until we're there, the world will not be fully healed, and hatred will be out there. But we are definitely trending in that direction. So we shouldn't think that this is an eternal state of affairs, as we see in text number 17, famous verse from Isaiah: the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat. These words are a metaphor and parable. The interpretation of the prophecies that the Jews will dwell at peace together with the wicked Gentiles, who like a wolf and leopard had sought to devour them. We are trending towards that day of peaceful coexistence. And in the interim, until we get there, like we said, it's a matter of consciousness. It's all a matter of consciousness. So if I'm mindful of the fact that wherever I go, I'm a Jew and I'm representative of my people, and I also have a message. It's not just about my identity as a born Jew, but there's actually a message, a Jewish message that the world very much wants to hear. Then we each in our own sphere of influence make waves and change the consciousness of people. We're coming up next week. It's going to be the day of the liberation of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, in 1798 on the 19th of Kislev. And he was in prison in the Peter Paul Fortress, and just an example of how you can share something with a non-Jew and change, and give them a profound perspective on life that they didn't have. So one of the Russian interrogators came, he was a high-ranking minister, and he knew the Bible, and he asked the Alter Rebbe, I want to ask you, I hear you're a very wise man. In Genesis, after the whole story of the eating from the tree of knowledge, God turns to Adam and he says to him, he asks him, where are you? Ayaka, where are you? And the question is, God doesn't know where he is. First of all, what kind of God is that who doesn't know where the people are, let alone that there's only two people in the world? Shouldn't be too hard to find at that point, right? So he said to him, the Alter Rebbe said, well, I'm sure you know Rashi's explanation. Rashi says it's just a way of God, because he was embarrassed that he'd eaten from the tree of knowledge. This was just a way of God sort of engaging him in conversation. But the Alter Rebbe said, if you want a deeper explanation, what Adam is the first human, and he is in a way representative of all of humanity. And what God was asking of him was, where are you in your life? Where are you in your life? What have you accomplished? What are you doing? You have lived, and he actually mentioned the age, he said 55 years old. Have you truly maximized the potential that God has given you to make your contribution to God's world and making it a better place, a more wholesome place, a more peaceful place, a more dignified place? So it's a calling to each and every one of us to ask ourselves, God is calling your name and is saying, where are you? What's going on? Like, where are you in this world? This is a big world. Do you know your place? Do you feel secure? Do you know what you're doing? Do you have a mission statement for your life? Or are you just like wandering through, meandering, whatever the day brings? And when the officer heard that, he was very, very taken by the Alter Rebbe's interpretation and very, very thankful. He said, you are indeed the wise man that they say you are. So what I'm saying is that there are very, very powerful messages in the Torah that are very universal and that people love to hear. I mean, I said the story on Yom Kippur of, my interaction with the tailor and the fact that we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. The Jewish New Year's, asking about the Jewish New Year's. Well, we celebrate on the day that man was created. Man was created singularly, as opposed to the rest of creation was created in large numbers, because God is saying to each and every human being, you're Adam. Like you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You're the only person. You matter. Your life matters. You're like the only person in the world. It's all here for you. And he says, well, Rabbi, we need to hear more messages like that. So this is the point. The point is we have a much, much more, some more captive, some less. I often find very, very, very captive audience. And as you know, for many of my travels, interacting with people, sitting next to people who are very interested in what Judaism has to say in a Jewish, message. Obviously, I'm very, very easily identifiable. But like I said, you don't have to be a quote unquote a rabbi to be able to share a Jewish message. And again, to bring the class to a conclusion, that is probably the most powerful and impactful way that we can do our part. None of us are going to fix the totality of the universe. The only part of the world that we can fix is the part that we can actually impact and influence, and those are the people that we interact with most. So let's get to the summary right now. Maybe there is no summary. Okay. No, what happened with that? Okay. Next week, a very, very, very thought-provoking class. Next week, we're going to talk about the Israel-centric, Israel-focused anti-Semitism, how we can counter that, and why Israel is so important to us. So stay tuned next week for lesson 3 entitled The Promised Land.
You might want to make that class 2 hours.
You think? Well, I'll have plenty of time because for me, it's going to be 11 o'clock in the morning. So, And there are additional readings in the booklet that you have, which you're welcome to peruse through. So God willing, next week, it will be Tuesday night, and we will be broadcasting live from Down Under. And so the whole class will be on Zoom. If you would like to be in person, you're welcome to go online now and book your ticket to Australia.
But make sure you do the paperwork first.
I spared you hours and hours and hours of how to navigate that site. So thank you all for joining this evening. Pleasure hanging out with you all, both of you here in person in the live studio, and those of you in the Zoom room. Now, those of you who do not have a book, please, I'm not sure why you don't, please be in contact with Nofar tomorrow at the office if it needs to be sent to you, whatever needs to happen. Hopefully you'll have a book in your hands by next week, okay?
Rabbi.
And thank you all.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye. Have a good trip.
Rabbi.
You don't say goodnight. You always say g'day in Australia. It's always g'day. Yeah.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I heard the paying for flights to down.
What?
I heard the Chabad is paying for flights down under.
What? I only see half your face.
I said I heard the Chabad is paying for flights to down under.
Our Chabad is sponsoring the flights. Yes.
Yeah.
We are, with your mileage.
Okay. Good.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay.
Bye, Lato.
Bye.